Going to be talking about some statements made by Mike King. And now this unfortunately overshadowed the Gumboot Friday last week. Of course, Gumboot Friday, a fundraiser for some very important work that his organisation does supporting young people with their mental health needs. But he made some statements about how drugs and alcohol isn't the problem, it's the solution to the problem when it comes to mental health, which is, well, a problematic thing to say, even if it was taken out of context. Joining me on the program now to comment on this and alcohol harm more generally, from the Salvation Army Social Policy Unit, Ana Ika. Ana, kia ora, good morning.
Morena, thanks for having me, Andrew.
I have to say this on air, because, look, I know you are a Tongan, big weekend for the Tongan community, particularly in Auckland. You survived the weekend, quite the celebration, quite the party, and a well-deserved win.
Yes, yep. Congratulations to the boys and the team. And I've got 2 Tongan flags in my background. And I've actually got 3-1 in my heart too. So, such a great weekend. So great, so good to see the community come out and support. It was just, it's always a great time when the MMT team are in town.
Yeah, exactly. And what a great game and a fantastic bit of a nail-biter and a well-deserved win. And fantastic for the community to have something to celebrate. I mean, a tenuous link here, but I know that some people perhaps took their celebrations a little bit too far, a little bit of overindulgence in that regard. And we're wanting to talk on the topic of alcohol harm today, in particular in light of Mike King's statements, which, as I say, may be taken out of context. And to be fair, Mike isn't a health professional. He's not a psychologist. He's not a drug counselling specialist in any way. He's talking from his lived experience. But when he says that drugs and alcohol aren't the problem for mental health, they're the solution, that sits problematically, particularly for you guys at the Salvation Army. You see the consequences of drug and alcohol harm in some of the families doing it tough in our communities.
Yeah, absolutely. I think me commenting today isn't an attack on Mike. It's just to highlight, from the Salvation Army and the work that we do in the addiction space, that that a lot of the addictions that come through our front door are, families or individuals trying to deal with, grief or loss or mental health challenges, and don't necessarily know how to navigate that space. And so then they fall into alcohol abuse and drug abuse, and that has a, domino effect on their family, on their employment, on their livelihoods, and it completely throws their lives off the rail. And so, just to reiterate that research has already shown, health research has already shown, and research in the addiction space has already shown there's a huge correlation in regards to making mental health worse and suicide rates worse, and just every other indicator around well-being worse when you're using alcohol in that space.
Now, we did reach out to Mike King. We asked him for comments on this. He didn't get back to us on that. But wanting, I suppose, to advocate from his point of view, which isn't necessarily one that I share, but it is perhaps understandable for people who are going through really tough circumstances, who don't have perhaps a high health literacy, who don't have access to mental health services, which, I mean, I'm sure Mike and others would be able to demonstrate are lacking within our communities, that they reach for what they have, which is drugs and alcohol. They're not bad people. They're just trying to do the best they can to cope with what are otherwise overwhelming situations. Can you have some sympathy in that space, Ana?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I look after sort of the Salvation Army's work around reducing alcohol harm, and one of the quotes I always talk about when I'm speaking on behalf of the Army or talking to the Army around the spaces, our co-founder William Booth, he said, we'll never win the battle against the gin shop that's in the corner, because there's there's hope that's found at the bottom of the bottle for a lot of those that we're supporting, for a lot of those that find themselves in this position. And part of the quote that William Booth was talking about is that we need to be able to outbid the subsidiary attractions that is of the hope that it's found in the bottom of a bottle. And so it wasn't necessarily just about shutting these gin stores down or shutting these bars down. It was how do we find a way to instill alternative hope that doesn't bring destruction to an individual's life, on top of trying to regulate and control alcohol. There's a reason why people turn to the bottle, and that's often because they find hope at the bottom of the bottle, and oftentimes it's because the bottom of the bottle numbs the pain or the challenges or the struggles that they're going through. And how do we create a society that educates people and supports people in a way that they know that there's alternative ways to be able to find hope? Obviously, for the Salvation Army, the hope that we try and instill is the hope that is only found in Christ, and the peace that is found in Christ, that outbids completely the hope that is found at the bottom of a bottle. But just to sort of acknowledge that we know why people turn to alcohol and drugs, but how do we instill an alternative hope that doesn't bring destruction?
And hey, too, I think the point that Mike King was trying to make, to take away drugs and alcohol from people without offering them an alternative hope, without making sure that we've got robust mental health services in our communities, in some ways that's doubly cruel.
In some senses, I think it differs for some groups of society. It's always best to go cold turkey. But for some groups of society, they sort of progressively wean off sort of their addiction. It depends, because addiction is sort of a spectrum, eh? So you've got you've got the extremely acute end, which in some of our services, some of those that we support, we'd have to remove hand sanitizer because they would drink the hand sanitizer because it's got alcohol in it. And then on the other end, you're seeing like, just your normal housewife that's drinking like a bottle of wine every single day. The challenges around alcohol and the abuse of alcohol and the impact of alcohol abuse is not determined by the deprivation levels of a community. It's right across the board. It's about how do you do both? How do you try and instill that hope in it at the same time trying to regulate how many bottle stores are popping up in these high deprivation communities? It's a matter of doing, trying to build bridges on the top of the barrier, as well as trying to strengthen those who are falling off the cliff, as well as strengthening the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff. It's if everyone sort of just tries to work in all of the different areas, then we would make strong advancements forward in regards to the harm of alcohol in our society.
I think that's so important as well, rather than be judgmental about somebody and the choices that they've made or their lack of self-control or whatever that is, if they're in an addictive situation, rather than pile on the judgment and punish those people, to be asking the questions of what has happened in their life, what is broken in their life that has taken them to such a level of desperation that something as destructive as drugs and alcohol seems like a better solution to them. Asking those broader questions and providing that support and providing that hope and strengthening that fence at the top of the cliff. I mean, ultimately that's what we want, but judgment and criticism in the meantime certainly not helping.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of the rhetoric that we hear when we're trying to advocate for regulations around alcohol is that it's a personal choice. And we're the fun police. But if it was so much fun, then why don't you put all of these bottle stores in Remuera or, St. Helier's, and instead they're all in Otara and Papatoe and in high deprivation communities. I guess one of the things that we try to do when we're sort of in the alcohol licensing space, which is people that apply to sort of open a bottle store, is that we always say, like, if the DRC today, the committee that gives bottle store owners a license. If they grant you your license, like, would you come sit with us? Would you come have a cup of tea with us?
Yeah.
Because they don't necessarily see, the harms of alcohol at the level that we see it on a daily basis. And so it's about how do we have a conversation so that you understand why we don't want your bottle store to open.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily an attack on you as a business owner. It's just because of the harm that we see on a daily basis. And I think what you're saying is there's a lot of judgment and sort of no understanding in that space. Is how do we change that? And I think society is so polarized, and so it's about how do we get in rooms with people that we don't necessarily agree with, but we potentially will hear them out. And I think more of that needs to be done in society.
You having a conversation, being able to see, hey, this is what the downstream consequences of my actions are. This is what it looks like for people who are from different parts of society than we've perhaps experienced before. I think that would certainly gone a long way. And hey, having a cup of tea together rather than another type of drink together certainly would be a better way forward in that regard. Anna, thank you so much for the work that you do at the Salvation Army, the work that you do alongside people who are struggling, who have made some tough decisions and do find themselves addicted to various substances. And thank you for the work that you do as well, advocating for those people to be able to make different choices and to be able to find hope in different places. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.